Good afternoon, Simon, and good afternoon to everybody on the call. I've been asked to give an update on developments, a state of play on Brexit, and also maybe to give a greater focus on exports, and in particular exports over the Landbridge, following my previous presentation to this series earlier this year. So with that in mind, let's dive straight in. So there's less than 70 days until the end of the transition period, and on the 1st of January there are going to be new customs and regulatory requirements for traders who trade with Great Britain, regardless of whether there's an EU-UK trade agreement. These new requirements will add costs and require additional time compared to the status quo and the frictionless trade that we have today. Obviously, you can minimise the impact on your business through adequate preparation, and there are supports available to assist traders. And you should check out our website on gov.ie. Businesses who haven't already done so really need to act now. The government is implementing the Brexit Readiness Action Plan, which was updated in September, and that work is ongoing. In terms of the, sorry, my mouse isn't moving down. Let's try and page down. Apologies, having some technical issues. Just apologies, people, until we try and get this page down.
Bear with me. We just want to get the piece of hand.
Yeah, Louise, maybe if you just re-upload it again.
So can people see now? Can people see my screen, Vicky, now?
Yeah, we're just waiting for the slideshow to come back up. Yeah, you're fine now. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. So people will have watched with great interest the media around the October European Council, and in particular the future relationship negotiations. And obviously we very much welcome the fact that the negotiations have resumed. Both parties have agreed joint organising principles around the negotiations, and in particular they have agreed to intensify those negotiations, with them taking place daily across all tables on the basis of legal text. There's a joint secretariat in place now to be able to work on the text, and one of the key points of those principles is nothing is agreed until everything is agreed. The key outstanding issues remain level playing field, fisheries and governance. And clearly these are very important issues from an Irish and an EU point of view. And a deal cannot come at any price. There will be significant impacts on the Irish agri-food and fisheries sector if there's no EU-UK free trade agreement. And the Department has done analysis of the EU MFN tariff regime that would apply on imports from GB and on the UK global tariff regime. And taken together, this would equate to a total tariff burden of between 2 and 2.5 billion on Irish agri-food trade of between 8.5 and 10 billion with the UK. Obviously, the tariffs won't apply on goods going north. So that is a very particular and significant impact, but there are many other impacts across fisheries and wider across the sector. Regardless of the outcome of the talks, the full, effective and timely implementation of the withdrawal agreement, including the protocol on Ireland, Northern Ireland, remains vital. So FTA or no FTA, there will be substantial and lasting change on the 1st of January, and businesses need to get ready now. My colleague Hazel Sheridan gave a presentation on import controls at a revenue seminar at the beginning of October that I couldn't attend. And I don't propose going into the detail of the import controls other than to cover them at a high level. So there are sanitary and phytosanitary controls that are in place, and they're there to protect humans, animals, plants from diseases, pests or contaminants. There's very detailed rules set down in EU legislation with the view to reducing or eliminating the possible risks to animal, plant and public health threats from goods coming in from non-EU countries. Those controls are carried out at border control posts on entry into the EU. There are other fishing regulations known as the illegal, unreported and unregulated regulations, which are there to support the conservation of fish stocks by preventing the entry of illegally caught fish entering the EU. And basically the controls on those wild-caught fishery products is everything for products of animal origin plus the IUU requirements plus direct entry routes for landings. As you know, the UK government published their border operating model in July of this year, and they updated it recently on the 8th of October, and the latest version is attached to the link in my presentation. This sets out the approach the UK will take to managing its trade border with the EU from the 1st of January 2021 after the transition period ends. The UK government guidance are issuing guidance notes on imports and exports of agri-food products from the 1st of January 2021 to supplement this border operation manual, and these are being updated regularly, and I would really encourage people to sign up to the UK government notification services so that they are getting the latest updates from the UK government. Basically, the border operation manual sets out a phased approach to the introduction of SPS, UK SPS controls and requirements. And anybody that is trading with Great Britain will need to fully understand and comply with these requirements if you want to continue to export to the UK. That BOM does not address trade with Northern Ireland. There is a separate border operating model for that is going to be updated as well. The bottom line on it is there are significant challenges for export certification systems and business processes in order to meet the requirements set down in that UK government border operation model. And there's ongoing work to reflect the latest UK government requirements in that regard. So in terms of phase one, so phase one kicks in on the 1st of January 2021. And from that date, live animals, including equines and germinal products, must be pre-notified to the UK authorities on their IPAF system at least one working day before and accompanied by an export health certificate. Documentary checks will occur remotely, and identity and physical checks will be carried out at the point of destination on a risk basis. For marine caught fish and fishery products, including some shellfish, they must be accompanied by an IUU catch certificate. Direct landings of marine caught fish must take place at designated ports. Vessels have to provide at least 4 hours notice for landings of fresh fish, or a minimum of 72 hours for other fishery products. And documentary checks will take place away from the port of entry. High priority plants and plant products must be accompanied by a phytosanitary certificate and pre-notified to UK authorities 4 hours in advance when using the roll-on, roll-off or air freight. And at least one working day in advance for other modes of freight movement. These high priority plants and plant products will be subject to documentary, identity and physical inspections, and the physical inspections will take place at the point of destination. The next phase of the requirements and controls kicks in on the 1st of April 2021. So all consignments of products of animal origin, including fish products, must be accompanied by an export health certificate. They must be pre-notified to the UK authorities on the UK IPAF system, which is equivalent to the EU tracing system. The UK authorities will carry out remote documentary checks on the export health certificates. To date, however, the UK has not published the detailed export health certificates which they will require. DEFRA have indicated to us that the certificates for different food product categories will be published over the coming weeks. However, the border operating model does give us some indication as to what those certs will look like, and they say that they will be using the current EU rest of the world certificates as the basis for the certs that they will use for EU exports to GB. So it's important that people are familiar with those. The border operating model confirms that the UK will be using the EU regulation definitions for composite products and associated requirements as the basis of their import controls for these products. And then the third phase of the approach, as currently set out, it will kick in on the 1st of July 2021, where all consignments entering Great Britain must enter through a UK border control post. The consignments will be subject to risk-based physical and identity controls and checks, and the border operating model currently states that those physical inspection rates from the 1st of July 2020 will be at a minimum 1% for most products. The border control posts will be located at GB entry points, whether that's ports, airports or the Eurotunnel where possible. However, for some locations which cannot accommodate BCP infrastructure at the entry point due to physical constraints, the UK government has committed to building the infrastructure close to the ports. So, as I said before, I had committed to giving an update on the Landbridge at today's presentation. So, obviously, the government continues to work to ensure that the UK Landbridge remains an efficient and effective route to market for Irish traders. Post-transition operators will be able to still use the Landbridge, but the way in which we use the Landbridge will change. From the 1st of January 2021, new customs and regulatory requirements will apply to animals and goods transiting the Landbridge. We continue to work closely with our key EU member states and with the EU Commission to ensure that this essential strategic link between Ireland and the rest of the single market remains open and operational for our traders. As I said before when we spoke about this, the Official Controls Regulation 2017-625 and through a delegated regulation 2019/2124 requires that official controls are performed on animals and goods re-entering the Union, with all relevant notification and control data processed via the EU Commission's Traces system. And Ireland, along with those member states collectively known as the G5, had concerns over the effect that elements of that delegated regulation could have on the operation of the Landbridge. And we engaged with the Commission to find a solution, allowing alternative information systems to be used to advise the BCP of re-entry for the purposes of SPS controls. And we appreciate how helpful the Commission has been in considering those alternative proposals, and they got the support of member states at a working party level in Brussels, and there is a technical amendment to that Commission delegated regulation that is progressing through the legal channels and will be in place for the 1st of January 2021. So in light of that technical amendment, we have been intensifying our engagement with those EU member states to share approaches on internal transits in light of the amendment to the delegated regulation. So just maybe some general rules around Landbridge movements from an SDS point of view. These rules apply to consignments of live animals, products of animal origin, composite products, animal byproduct and derived products, and hay and straw. And from the 1st of January 2021, these transit consignments must be moved in accordance with the customs transit procedure to maintain their union status. These consignments are subject to official controls at a designated border control post on re-entering the Union, and 24 hours prior notification of the arrival of the consignment to the BCP of re-entry is required. So in terms of incoming internal transits of food of animal origin, so these are transits that are coming from an EU member state across the Landbridge into Ireland. So Ireland, we pushed hard for the amendment to the delegated regulation, and now we are going to use those the flexibilities that are set out and will be set out once that law comes into force in that regulation, whereby operators in an EU member state submit their transit accompanying document to basically open the transit in the EU member state that they're leaving from, and that transit then is uploaded onto the NCTS, which is a shared platform, and Ray will probably talk a little bit more about that during his presentation. But that platform is shared between member states where information is exchanged, and that information then is sent, the Irish Revenue have access to that information. In the UK, the carrier, which will probably be the haulage company, has to complete a pre-boarding notification on the customs RoRo system, and they insert the master reference number, which is created once they open the transit accompanying document on NCTS. So they have to complete that, insert it into the RoRo pre-boarding notification system. Obviously, you'll have to comply with any UK transit rules when you're in the UK, and then when that consignment is on the ship en route to Ireland, Revenue shares the details in the transit accompanying document and the pre-boarding notification with DAFM. So we know it's on the boat and we have the information on the TAD. DAFM will do the documentary checks prior to the arrival of the goods, and if there's no issues reported, that lorry will be given an exit the port routing. So that's the happy path. Obviously, if there are concerns in relation to the documentary checks, the Department of Agriculture reserves the right to call that consignment into the port for checks. But in the main, we're just verifying origin, so we anticipate there won't be many issues with that process. So that is for incoming internal transits of food of animal origin. Then we have outgoing internal transits, and when I say internal transits, these are transits within the EU, so they're known as T2 transits. So this is where we're moving from Ireland to another EU member state via the Landbridge. So as I said, we've been intensifying our engagement with the member states. In particular, we've met very recently with France and Belgium. So France, the system that France has set up, their SI Brexit system, relies on the traces systems. So France will require the submission of a common health entry document on traces for prior notification and for the performance of official controls. So anybody that is sending consignment of food of animal origin from Ireland to France has to complete the CHED in traces, and the declarant has to complete the TAD in the NCTS system. That information then is obviously shared with the French on traces via the traces system and via the NCTS system. The CHED must be completed first on traces, because when you do that, there is a CHED reference number, and that reference number has to be included in the transit accompanying document. So when the operator responsible for the load, that has to be based in an EU member state to use traces, once they complete part 1 of the Common Health Entry document, a CHED reference number is generated, and this reference number must be included in the transit declaration. And then once that information is submitted, then the French SI Brexit system is able to, together with number plate recognition, it's able to know when those goods are en route into France, and they propose doing the documentary checks on those goods prior to the arrival of the consignment at the BCP in France. They then will complete the CHED on traces, and if there's no issues noted, the lorry is green routed in France. Belgium will be using a similar system to Ireland for transits from Ireland to Belgium via the Landbridge, so whereby they will be relying on the TAD in NCTS. So there won't be a requirement to complete the CHED in traces for transits of food of animal origin that are going from Ireland to Belgium over the Landbridge. Then there are some consignment-specific rules for movements between any EU member state or any EU member state over the Landbridge. So for live animals and germinal products, these must be accompanied by an intra-union trade certificate, and the responsible operator must give 24 hours prior notification of the arrival of the consignment by submitting Part 1 of the Common Health Entry document on traces. Animal byproducts must be transported in a sealed container, and high-risk animal byproducts must be notified to the BCP 24 hours in advance of their arrival, and again through completion of the Common Health Entry document on traces NT. As I said, there are UK transit rules that will apply, and we know from the border operating models so far that there will be this phased approach to SBS controls. So from January 2021, the UK transit rules state that for live animals, germinal products, products of animal origin subject to safeguard measures, prior notification, health certification, confirmation consignment has left GB territory, and they don't propose to do physical or ID checks. The high-risk ABP will require prior notification, ABP commercial documents, a confirmation that the consignment has left GB territory, and there's no physical or ID checks. From April 2021 onwards, products of animal origin not subject to safeguard measures are required to prior notify. There's a requirement for a health cert, confirmation the consignment has left GB territory, and that there's no physical or ID checks, and we don't know what the situation will be from July 2021 onwards. We have worked very hard with our EU partners on ensuring the challenges in EU ports for transit Landbridge traffic are addressed. But there's very little that we can do to address delays and blockages at the UK ports. The government has pointed out for some time now that, including in the various readiness plans that I referred to earlier, that there will be delays at ports immediately after the end of the transition period, with the Dover-Calais link identified as a particular likely bottleneck. This is also the view of the UK government, who have written to traders in the UK and published its reasonable worst-case scenario, which envisaged queues of up to 7,000 HGVs in Kent, and of a possible 60 to 80% reduction in trade flows using the crossing. And traders really should consider switching to direct route options where feasible. The process for moving goods directly between Ireland and other EU member states will not change, nor be subject to new procedures. So goods moving directly will also avoid any delays in UK ports. So, thank you very much for listening. If you need any help, we have a call centre, we have an email address, and we have our website where there's further information, including presentations, supports, etc. So, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you indeed, Louise. And my God, there's a huge amount of information to digest in that. It's probably just as well recording it, because I think we will probably need to go over and over and over again in it, particularly when you look at the 3 phases as well that the UK is adopting. So there's a few questions there, but we'll come back to I think we'll come back to you after all the speakers. But thanks again, Louise, for that. It's really good to get the update from you. Okay, so now I'd like to introduce our next speaker, and our next speaker is Ray. Sorry, beg your pardon. Our next speaker today is Ray Ryan, and he is assistant principal in the Brexit team in Revenue. He's in the Customs divisions of the Revenue Commissioners and has responsibility for the Brexit Trader Engagement Programme. His role involves providing information and practical support to businesses that will be impacted by the new trading environment with Great Britain in 2021. Over to you, Ray.
Thanks, Simon. Good afternoon, everybody. As Simon said, I'm part of the Customs Division Brexit unit who've been engaging in trade for the last, I suppose, number of years at this stage. So my presentation today will just go through some of the requirements and cover some of the topics that Louise has referenced as well in relation to obviously exporting and the Landbridge and some of the requirements from a customs point of view on that. So again, it's about taking action and making decisions as soon as possible, in particular if you're moving goods early in 2021. So as we know, Brexit has happened. What does it actually mean? It means that the UK will now be considered third country for customs purposes. This excludes Northern Ireland, so goods going from Ireland to Northern Ireland will not have any customs formalities applying to them. And again, it's a reminder, I suppose, that customs formalities will apply from the 1st of January 2021, regardless of if there is a free trade agreement or no agreement, customs formalities will apply. This means customs declarations will apply and will be needed following GB from the 1st of January 2021. And again, this links into the possible interventions, some of which Louise has referenced in relation to Department of Agriculture. There's also other agencies that would have interventions, and obviously customs would have particular controls as well in relation to that. So just be aware of all those, that once customs declarations are being made, there's potential for interventions. So again, the 1st of January isn't that long away. So my next few slides will go through importing and exporting and transit. I'll briefly run through some of the requirements in relation to it. So in relation to imports, if you're bringing goods in from GB, these will require customs declarations from the 1st of January. So again, it's the customs import declaration, but also a safety and security declaration. There's 2 separate declarations required. Different parties can submit them, but it's an awareness that these need to be submitted in advance of departure from the UK. So these need to be submitted prior to departure from GB. And it's important that, I suppose, it's a change of business models maybe for a lot of companies, that they may just be boarding stuff in GB now and it moves across. And it's that advance notice, that advance declarations, the advanced data that you'll require to ensure those declarations are done prior to the goods leaving GB. It may mean that a longer lead in time in relation to orders, and that I think just be aware of that. Again, a reminder that these are subject to intervention and or license requirements. And then also that these are subject to the payment of duties and VAT. Obviously, if there's a free trade agreement, the level of duties will be reduced or maybe gone in certain situations. So be aware of the commodity codes of your products. So the commodity code of your product is tied into the duty that will apply to it. In terms of the VAT is normally applied at the point of importation for customs declarations. There is legislation coming through in next week in relation to postponed accounting, which allows you to account for the VAT as you would currently do, I suppose, in relation to the bi-monthly returns. And anyone that's registered for VAT in Ireland will have an option to avail of that postponed accounting. Once the legislation is passed, more details will be available through Revenue, and we'll update our Revenue Brexit page. In relation to exports then, so sending goods to GB, then this requires a customs declaration and a safety and security declaration. This is slightly different than the import though, because you can actually combine that safety and security information into the export customs declaration. So it does form part of one declaration as such, whereas at import you need two separate declarations. At export you can combine them. And currently the majority of cases it will be one export declaration with combined safety and security information. Again, these may be subject to interventions and or license requirements, and this is linked back to the commodity code. So if you're unsure if it's going to need interventions or if there's particular license requirements, you need to know the commodity code of your product. So it's a classification code. And again, if you know this code, you can look up the details in relation to it, check with the relevant agencies if there's implications, or even contact revenue for if you've doubts about anything on it. Just in relation to the exports themselves, we're finding a lot of queries coming in relation to the import formalities in GB. So currently a lot of contracts will be delivered door to door as such. So you're exporting goods here and they're delivered to the door of your customer. That implies that you may be responsible for the import formalities. It's a delivered duty paid contract as such in relation to customs and the Incoterms that apply. If you are under those contracts, it may be expected that you complete the import formalities in the third country. And it's a case of an awareness of that, having the discussion within your supply chain with your customers. Are they expecting you to complete those import formalities in GB? And if they are, have you the capacity, or have you someone that can lodge those declarations on your behalf? And again, it's something that you just need to look into, ensure that obviously if the exporting side of things, that you complete the declarations within Ireland. And again, prior to departure, those export declarations are required, but then also that you may need to complete import formalities in the third country. Just in relation to that final point there on the pre-boarding notifications, Louise mentioned it earlier in her presentation. I have a slide in a minute that will go into more detail, but the reason for the pre-boarding notifications is for ro-ro traffic, so for trucks on the ferry services going to or coming from GP, the pre-boarding notifications are required. So all those declarations are referenced there. You'll get a master reference number, which is a unique ID for each declaration, and that MRN, the master reference number, will be required to be added into the pre-boarding notification. I'll go into a bit more detail on it in a minute. Just in terms of the transit then, so if you're moving goods from Ireland through GB into EU or vice versa, the customs declarations will apply, and there's a transit procedure that you can avail of. And this is one transit declaration rather than four. And what we mean by four is you don't need to do an export declaration in Ireland, import into GB, an export from GB and an import into the EU. It's one declaration. The transit will allow you to leave from an office of departure, go through the UK as an office of transit, and then your office of destination in another EU member state. Again, these may be subject to intervention. All the transit declarations, all the goods on board require a financial guarantee to cover any potential loss of duties. So again, it's an important differentiation between import and exporting. You don't require guarantees for those, but in transit you do require a financial guarantee, and it's something that you will need to consider, that if you are moving goods by the Landbridge, if you are going to do the declarations, you will need this financial guarantee in relation to transit, or if someone is going to do the declarations on your behalf, they will require the guarantee to be in place. So it's something very important to bear in mind if you are moving goods via Landbridge, and have that discussion as soon as possible if you are moving goods early in 2021. In relation to that second last point, there is options for a simplified procedure. The simplified procedure, it's actually the same type of declarations are required, but the difference is that in the normal transit procedure, you have to go to the office of departure to open the transit, and any checks or interventions can take place there. In relation to the simplified procedure, you can get your premises authorised, and you can do the declaration, the transit declaration from your premises, and create the TAD, the transit accompanying document that needs to travel with it on your premises, rather than having to do it at office departure. And again, as part of our own outreach program and dealing with the trade and discussing with the trade, we're encouraging as many businesses as possible to look into the capacity for doing this simplified procedure. Either you as your business yourself, or your logistics company or your supply chain partners have access to this, so they can create the TAD declarations, the transit declarations at their premises, and then they can move the goods free or through the ports. And again, if it's in another EU member state coming into Ireland, if someone in that member state needs to raise a transit, but you can be authorised to close it at your premises here. So again, it's a two-way system and a two-way authorisation, and there is more information on our Revenue Brexit page in relation to that. And we also have videos available from a recent webinar, which can be reviewed online as well. And again, anything moving on the ro-ro service will require pre-boarding notifications. So again, anything coming from GB into our Irish ports or leaving from our Irish ports into GB will require this pre-boarding notification. So I'll just give you a bit more detail in relation to that. From the 1st of January 2021, Revenue are introducing a customs roll-on, roll-off service. So it consists of 3 functions: the pre-boarding notification, the channel lookup, and the parking self-check-in. Now, the channel lookup and the parking self-check-in are more linked to the driver's responsibilities, such options that the driver has. The channel lookup allows you, while you're on board a ferry, to check the channel that you're assigned when you arrive into the ports in Ireland. A parking self-check-in then, if you've been assigned for customs check or customs controls, you go to the relevant compound, and when you're in there, you can actually self-check-in via your mobile phone for the parking that you're in, and then Revenue will interact with you through that phone then from then on. In relation to the pre-boarding notification, I suppose this is the key one in terms of moving goods. Both at export and at import from GB, a pre-boarding notification is required to be presented to the ferry companies. They will not allow you on board without the pre-boarding notification. So at export, the pre-boarding notification will include all MRNs that are on board the vehicles. So if there's a vehicle leaving Ireland, going to GB with goods on board, all the goods on board should have a master reference number associated with them. It could be multiple master reference numbers, it could be a transits plus exports, but any MRNs that are on board that vehicle need to be included in the pre-boarding notification. Once the pre-boarding notification is valid then, they're allowed progress board the ferry and they can move onwards to the UK. Similarly at import, the pre-boarding notification is required prior to arrival at the ferry compound as well. So the MRNs for any of the import declarations or the transit declarations at import will be required to be added onto that pre-boarding notification. So again, if you're thinking of consolidations or groupage, there's multiple MRNs that will be on board. So it may be that your supply chain partner is creating this pre-boarding notification. There is more information available on the Revenue website, and we will be adding granular detail as we get closer to December in relation to that. And we have been engaging with logistics companies and hauliers, so they are aware of the process. And there is a presentation available and a video available online with more detail on some of the screenshots that you may be interested in. So just in relation to, I suppose, some further procedures that businesses can avail of to aid efficient movement of goods, I've covered simplified transit. Inward and outward processing, so if you're bringing in goods for further processing or you're sending goods out for further processing, there is authorizations available that allow you to have release from duties. So again, if your business is involved in this, there is an application process involved with Revenue. I would advise checking out the details in relation to the relevant processing, the relevant requirements. For inward processing, there's a lot of requirements around what products, what's in your factory, what's held in stock, and reporting requirements. So it is a bit of detail required in relation to it. The relevant units in Revenue are very good at dealing with even advance of the application, dealing with queries, aiding you and assisting you. And there's videos available online in relation to more details of how the inward or outward processing would apply. In relation to temporary storage and warehousing, this is another option. For example, some businesses might be bringing in goods in bulk. They mightn't actually be using them on the factory floor or actually selling them for a number of weeks or a number of months. So warehousing allows you to keep the goods under customs supervision. So it suspends the payment of duty until you're actually releasing them for free circulation. So releasing them for use. So you can do your import declarations as you require them. So it's a good cash flow management option. The temporary admission will be related to bringing in goods for temporary use. So maybe machinery that's been brought in for temporary, maybe a particular project that's needed for it's going to go back out. There's, again, suspension of duties can apply there. All of them will require a financial guarantee and an application process to Revenue. So again, if you think your business would require some of these or could benefit from these, time to act is now. Make inquiries, start the application process, and get engaging with your financial institution so you can set up the guarantees that will be required. Just in relation to just the final few points, I haven't actually mentioned it. The customs registration. A significant amount of businesses still have to do this first step, which is register for IORI, and this is required to engage with Revenue systems. So even if you're not taking on the responsibility of doing the declarations yourself, you actually need the person that's doing those declarations for you will need your IORI number to be inputted onto the declarations themselves. And as I mentioned in the previous slide, there's applications for those authorizations. You need a IORI number to actually apply for those. So again, take that step to register for IORI. It's a very straightforward process on Revenue Online Service. Once you're registered in that, it takes 2 or 3 minutes to register for your IORI, and there's a video explaining a step-by-step guide on it on our website. And again, I suppose if you're moving goods early 2021, you really should know at this stage who's going to submit the declarations for you. Is it you through your company? Is it an agent or the haulier or a logistics company on your behalf is going to submit the declarations? If you're not aware of who's going to do those declarations, you need to get take action, make those decisions as soon as possible. And part of the process is being aware of the data that's required for a declaration. So in terms of the classification, the commodity codes, the requirements that Louise mentioned in her presentation around any agri or plant products, valuation, the origin of goods, anything like that, all the data that's required in a declaration. You may not have easy access to it at the moment, but it's something that will be required, and you may be required to provide further documentation as you're importing or exporting goods. So it's to have that awareness, have that data available to you so that you can present it to someone who's submitting the declarations or present it to the relevant agency if it's required. And again, that's supply chain discussion. So as I've gone through a very quick run through of the requirements from customs point of view. Each party in the supply chain would have responsibilities for completing different aspects of that, and it's to have that discussion to ensure that your goods can get from departure to destination as smoothly as possible, so that if you are exporting goods, all the export formalities are completed here by the relevant parties, and that any import formalities that need to be completed in GB are completed by the relevant parties so that your goods can get to their destination, and the same for the transit, that any requirements in relation to transit are completed. The final point there is in relation to import requirements. There's a new revenue system. It's actually coming online the 23rd of November, not the 2nd, and that will be in place obviously for the 1st of January. So there's new import requirements around that, and just to be aware of that, and there's more information on that website. And then just finally, any queries in relation to, obviously today we're going to take some questions, but if there's any more detailed queries, you can send an email into that address. And on the revenue Brexit page there, we've gone into a bit more detail in relation to more granular information. So there is information in particular for exporters, for importers, for haulage companies in relation to the customs declarations and the roles and responsibilities. And the recent webinars we held, we have all the videos up online, which are a useful resource too. So thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ray. And again, very comprehensive and lots to think about there. And it surprises me still the kind of different levels of preparedness that companies are at in this country. So I'm extremely prepared, but there are still some companies that are really just beginning to get their head around this. And it still surprises me at this late stage that we still have companies that are like that. So okay, look, there's a few questions for you coming in as well, which I'll pose to you when we come back after David, if that's okay. Okay, so our final speaker is David Sadlier. David is the Director of Customer Solutions in Readiness Logistics Ireland. He's responsible for the management of supply chain and logistics solutions to existing and new customers. David.
So Simon, before I start, to just do a time check. You want me to get through this reasonably quickly, don't you?
I think we can. If we can impose on people, just bear with us maybe for 5 to 10 minutes afterwards.
Okay, I'll be as quick as possible to get through my 763 slides.
Do you want to just put on display as well, David? You have it. Do you want to just put it on the presentation mode?
Yeah, I'll do that now. That should come up. Okay, so before I start, my name is David Sadler. I'm joined today by Sean Brennan, who's our Director and Head of Readiness Customs and Compliance Division, which is called ALS. And ALS have a very strong European presence, and they can help you with any technical queries you want. Also, Sean will help me if there's any technical questions at the end that I can't answer. Just a note around, just from my own point of view, Louise's presentation, very thorough, and her team are going to be supporting, I think, one of the most complex post-Brexit processes. And in terms of Ray, I have to say, really, really good business-focused presentation. And I think people need to stay very focused on the simplified procedures and the bonded facilities, because that will help their business. Okay, so in a world of COVID, Brexit, US elections, and the possibility of Christmas going on hold, we're going to take a reasonably positive look at Brexit and see if there's any positivities out of this available for us. We're going to cover, very simply, material movement to and from the UK and Europe, key watch for items on everybody's Brexit list at this stage. I'm sure everybody's seeing umpteen Brexit lists, and look at how this will affect an actual flow of material. So I'm going to pick one of the most complex ones, which is groupage, and also we're going to look at alternatives to the Landbridge. Sometimes if we can't get through it with ease, we can go around it. Okay, so I'll start on this. So we're looking at, and everybody's probably gone through this process already, plan to ensure your stability of material, no hidden costs, make sure you hit the market lead time in and out, and the right custom solutions. Prepare, understand the ramifications. If you haven't at this stage or you haven't got a good idea, start reading very, very quickly. You just need to understand what's required, understand when it's required, and understand the most cost-effective solution for your business. Keep this as well, and we've seen this with a lot of our activity. You need to make sure your organization, more importantly your suppliers and your customers, are prepared in advance. In Ireland, the awareness is quite high. When you go to the UK, and we have a lot of experience in that, it's not so well prepared. So your weakest link will be your weakest link. So it won't be the organisations in Ireland. It's probably going to be the UK ones. So you need to connect with those parts of your supply chain. And you need to make sure you have a logistics partner that can deliver the most cost-effective solutions for you, no matter what they are. And there's a lot of good ones out there. They're all prepared for this. So that's around your planning. Sorry, Simon, that's just decided to. So looking at the Brexit checklist, Ray's mentioned a lot of these already. I'm only going to focus on one or two things. Your Incoterms, whether you're selling or you're buying, your Incoterms are critically important to you. If you're buying, for example, ex-works out of the UK, you're responsible for all the exit paperwork. You're responsible for the customs. You're responsible for the duties on the inbound and all the paperwork inbound. So be very careful how you're selling and how you're buying, because Incoterms previously weren't really of importance. They're critically important now in the ownership of the responsibility and the ownership of costs. So very important that you look at that. When you look at other components of the checklist, your commercial invoice and docs are important. You need to make sure that you know what has to be completed on those invoices, especially going to the UK, in and out of the UK. But if you're using the Landbridge and you're importing or exporting to France or Germany, you still need to produce an invoice, which was never required before, because you're going to have to complete transit documents, whether they're T1, etc., and you need that paperwork either way. So very important to look at your commercial and your docs that are required. Also, the guys mentioned the tariff codes. If there's a deal, fantastic. If there isn't, at this stage you should know your products, your tariff codes, and the impact on your business in terms of duty, VAT payments, etc. So that's critical for you. So what we want to do is just look at a visual, and we're going to take a groupage model from the UK, first of all, and look at the components of that checklist and some of the areas that Ray mentioned, which are very important, and see how they physically play out. So we're going to take a groupage from the UK. This is how it was. The UK was in Europe, Ireland was in Europe, and they were all European borders. We're going to take, for example, 10 suppliers moving their product into a freight depot of your freight provider. They're going to move it onto a truck, move it across the port and into Ireland and deliver it to your customer, either through direct from the freight depot in Dublin or Galway or Cork, or through sub-hubs. But that's your basic model. What's going to happen now, obviously, is it's going to look like this. You still have your 10 suppliers. They're still going along the same physical route. You have your exports and import procedures here and here. And again, your Incoterms and your Brexit checklist here, and your import and duties and taxes here. Understand them and how they impact your business. So if we look at that and just push that down, when we look at what's going to happen to your physical supply chain and the components of when you're moving product back and forth, and we've just taken an inbound flow, it can be the same for the outbound. You need to understand the terms. This is where it applies to. When you're buying your product, understand those terms, make sure you got favorable terms. Most suppliers in the UK, I know, would rather ex-works because it just cuts any responsibility they have off. You need to be very conscious of that and the impact that will make financially and procedurally on your business. You also need to look at who's responsible for the documentation, etc. Also in this place here, you've got your procedures for the correct paperwork. It needs to be shown. You need to make sure your customs agents and your suppliers their use are reputable and have the capacity. Anybody who's moving product from a logistics point of view back and forth to the UK should know their business and do know their business. But just double check. Know your tariff codes and your procedures and how you're going to purchase that and the duty charges. When you move then and you're moving into the freight depot, your product will move in a trailer that has multiple suppliers to an end customer onwards. All the paperwork must be correct. So again, Ray spoke about this, is that you're going to be doing a pre-entry. So if I have 10 shipments or 20 shipments on that truck, all of those entries need to be done correctly before that truck can move. You need to make sure you have a reputable logistics company, and most are, that will not put anything on that truck that hasn't been pre-cleared, because if it goes to the border and it's not, it's going to stick and get stuck there. It's going to be huge enough as it is. So this is a critical piece that you need to make sure, and that's your pre-clearance. When you actually get to the port, you've got multiple country entries. They'll go through the green channel, and once that's received, it'll just move out of the UK. If the transport buyer allows any non-customs pre-approved shipments on that, it's going to stop. You're then going to go in your boat over into Ireland, and before the transit across the channel, the applicable customs details are sent to the Irish Customs Organisation. If there are multiple customer shipments, so again, my 20 shipments on that truck all need, probably they're going to have 20 different clearing agents at the far end. And again, Ray mentioned this about simplification. There's a ways around this. But if any of those entries are not done properly, the shipment holds. So you could be doing everything correctly and somebody else isn't. It's going to impact your business. Then you're looking at ensure the customs agents have completed everything and has a TAN account. So again, if there's no trade agreement, you're going to be paying duty, you're going to be paying VAT. If you don't want to outlay that, make sure your provider has a TAN account, or if you're big enough, get your own TAN account, so that you're not running down to the keys with checks or transfers of money, because the goods will not be allowed move out of the port until the duty and taxes are paid. Once you're the customs, then you're into a local DC, like Dublin, for sorting and onward delivery to the end customer around the Dublin region or onto a separate hub. You then have your shipment be transferred to your main DC and, as I said, possibly sub-hub, and then it's going to go out for delivery. Your deliveries stay all the same, but you also got to recognize now that you are importing from a third country, so you're still going to have to record all the data, record all your paperwork, because you will have details to go back to the customs on. So that's basically your flow. There's two ways or two options around this, and Ray alluded to them. The first one is where you have your pre-clearance. So the goods are pre-cleared in the UK. I have my 20 consignments. They're all cleared with my 20 different providers and 20 different customs agents. My 20 different receiving customs agents here have cleared everything, and everything flows through properly. The process, and I'm not going to go too much on it, works like this. And I'll talk to people later on, but we're short of time. But basically, that's called the pre-clearance. The pros and cons around that: no transit guarantee needed. So what I mean by that is, if you want to do simplification, or if you want to do a process that's leaner than that, you need to do a guarantee. Goods being pre-cleared before arrival, and providing a green routing is received, no need to stop at the port. This generally will work well with full loads from one customer. But if you have 20 different shippers and 20 different consigners and 20 different export agents and 20 different import agents, the likelihood is that something will go wrong initially, or something could go wrong. So in the cons, multiple clearing agents, any goods without a clearance will result in the trailer being stuck at Holyhead or Dublin, potential short-term turnaround time for declarations, and this is an all or nothing model. So if you're moving full loads back and forth to the UK, this will work fine. If you're confident you and everyone will do the right things, this model will work for you. If not, you need to look at this particular model. And Ray mentioned this, and it's a really important piece that people need to look at the simplification and what you can do. The whole goal is to make sure your product runs through cleanly. Again, the process, I've put readiness in here, but this could be any provider. The process will run like this, and I'm not going to go through the detail, but it's called a transit model. And basically what that does is that You're clearing the goods in here and you're putting them into a bond and saying, I'm moving this product into a bond. And this bond for us is Dublin and Galway because we've picked I suppose, cut the country in half. Other companies will have Dublin, other companies will have Shannon, but we have a transit bond facility here. So what that does is that moves the component of the border here. So once you get pre-cleared, you can move my 20 shipments into here. They can sit in that facility and they can be cleared. So I'm going through my normal channels here, but I'm physically doing my customs clearance piece here. This is the model people should really look at to ensure sustainability of your movements, and it works perfectly well, as Ray mentioned. The pros of that: minimum delays at port, straight through to Dublin or Galway, transit bonded facility. That's ours, but other people will have one in Dublin. Some people may have one in Galway or in Shannon, etc. No time restrictions on clearances because the goods can sit in that warehouse for up to 90 days. You're not going to set this up yourself. You might have a bonded facility that will work perfectly well, but generally you should be looking at your logistics provider to perform this service for you. And 1 day transit reduction versus option 1. So if, for example, we were working with the Chamber of Commerce in Galway, we push it through to Galway, it goes straight through and sits there, so it's not getting delayed anywhere along the line. Cons: make sure your transport and customs provider can offer this service into the west of Ireland and the rest of Ireland, should I say, as well. And they will. You just need to talk to them and make sure that they do have it. So that's on the UK. Execute. Make sure your organisation, suppliers and customers are prepared well in advance, and make sure your logistics partners understand your supply chain, what you need to do. And again, the example I've gone through there does not include agri. That's a different supply chain and one that probably is going to have to step out of the normal industrial movements of product back and forth because of the complexities around it. So very quickly, I'm going to talk about the Landbridge. So we mentioned earlier on documentation, what has to happen if you're moving product to and from the EU into Ireland across the Landbridge. You will need invoices. You will need to do your transit documentation, etc. However, there's an alternative solution. Okay, so in addition to the Landbridge option, there's an offering of a bypass program into Europe. Now, this bypass program works on low-low, so it's a low-low, so you're loading on a container and you're loading off a container, and this can manage for both full loads and groupage movements. So, for example, we will move product out of Ireland, probably not into France, but in some FTL into France, but mainly into these two hubs, which is the likes of Antwerp or Rotterdam, and then go into our main DC here and out. Other freight companies will have a similar model, but again, that offers, and then it's the same flow inbound as well. That removes the risk of elongated delays in transiting the UK bridge, especially in the first couple of months. Traditionally, companies will look at this and say, I don't want to go ro-ro because I want to get my product moved out of Ireland and I want it into Germany within 48 hours or 24 hours, and I want it distributed around Europe. However, I think there is a demand still for that, but that's a very small demand. We're living in a post-COVID world. The reality is people walking into a shop and asking for a TV and wanting it today is past. I think there's an opportunity, and companies should really look at this around adjusting your supply chain. And traditionally, this model would have been an extra day or 2 days longer. However, I think with Brexit, it's going to be down to 1 day and max 2 days. And realistically, that offers huge advantages. Some of those advantages are you're going to negate the risk of a supply chain from the impending exit of the UK from the EU because you're just bypassing it. You're going to reduce your transit cost. So everybody's talking about the negativity of Brexit. If you plan correctly, you can actually reduce your cost in and out of Europe by using a low-low or container option to move your product from point to point if it's full load, or move it through a groupage network. You've just got to accept that it's going to be slightly longer lead time. It is a slight extension. However, I think that's going to be negated by the delays because you're going to have to go a border crossing into the UK and out of the UK. So in reality, there's going to be very little difference. You're going to get the same service and traceability. And most important, it will allow companies to decide if the post-Brexit COVID supply chain can sustain a slightly longer lead time and lower transport costs. So that's a real positive piece. So in summary, I would certainly say for companies, look at what Ray mentioned, the simplification of your procedures. Make sure your transport provider has a bonded facility. Get your product flowing through all the way and take the risk out. If you're looking at going through the UK, understand what has to happen, which is your documentation. But go back into your business and question your sales organizations and question your supply chain teams to say, can I live with an extra day and reduce costs? And I think the answer is going to be in a COVID world, the answer is going to be yes. So that's me. Simon, I'll hand back to you.
Thanks, David. I was just trying to find my cursor and my mouse on the screen. Again, another very comprehensive one, and one I think we could give a lot of time to. We were going to take a few live questions, so people are welcome to come in on that if they want to. I have one here, maybe just to get the ball rolling. On in the meantime, I don't think our colleague Brian is ready, so I'll. There's a couple here. What impact, if any, will a free trade agreement have on the potential Landbridge delays? And maybe I'll start with you, actually, David, as I have you. And also, what's your view on? Are we going to see a rush to avoid the Landbridge on the 2nd of January next year, or on the 1st of January? What are we going to see? Are we going to need a massive amount of shipping, just from your point of view there?
Two things. Well, what you're going to see prior to Christmas, I believe, is going to see an upturn in product movements into Ireland while people get the product in, because they're nervous of what's going to happen. It's not the end of the world, and we'll work through this. So, but that doesn't mean that people aren't going to rush their product through. So you're going to see demands on the Landbridge. And we could come a stage where there's just not enough space. Certainly what we're going to see on the UK bypass, so out of your movements out of Europe, yes, you're going to see a lot more container ships shipping out of Rotterdam, Antwerp, out of France, out of Spain, into Ireland. There is a definitive quantity of space available. I think it will get tight, but you're seeing companies looking at this as an opportunity to expand. So, for example, myself and Declan spoke to two of the board members of CLDN in 2019 around options out of Cork into Antwerp. They didn't take it up at the time, but when COVID came along, they've done and they've put that service in. I think you're going to see more of the short sea providers building additional services into Ireland from Europe. And I think what you're going to see is a drop off over time in the Landbridge. It's just too complex, and the reality is, and the key driver, I think, in talking to a lot of our customers and suppliers, is that people are looking at their supply chain slightly differently. Yes, you're going to have certain product that just has to get to market very quickly, but I do think that people are taking a more mature view after what's happened in the last 12 months around their supply chains, and I think you'll see more and more drifting towards the short sea, and I think that capacity will be supplied by those providers because they see it as a business opportunity.
Thanks, David. So just to say, if people are very shy, I'll call out their questions, but we have the capacity to bring people in to ask questions live. I just need to find out from my colleague actually how they actually signal that. You might just let me know, Vicky. But in the meantime, we're going to bring Brian in, who has a question. Vicky, if you could bring Brian in. You might tell us, Brian, who the question is directed to.
Yeah, it's just directed towards Louise at the Department of Ag. It's just to check, Louise, that UK exporters of product of animal origin will all require original health certificates when entering the EU. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, so previously that might have been food coming from a third country and it would have had a longer lead time to get that documentation. And now it may be that it's required a lot sooner, closer to the time when the goods are actually moved.
Yes, so there's a requirement to advance notify the Department of Agriculture 24 hours in advance with the required documentation, as well as completing the documentation required on traces. So yes, there is a requirement for export health certs. So anybody who is bringing in goods from GB from the 1st of January, you'd want to make sure that your suppliers are able to provide you with the export health certs.
Perfect. Thanks, Liz.
Simon, can I jump in there as well on something that Brian mentioned? Again, for anybody who's on the call who's in the agri sector, talk to your logistics providers, because what Louise outlined is quite complex, and what you're going to find is that your food product may go in a separate supply chain. So if you have a groupage consignment and there's food product on it, the reality is not everybody wants to take that, because it's going to get stopped in customs. Louise, correct me if I'm wrong. So I think there's going to be pressure on that sector to look at their supply chain, and it is going to get more complex and more costly potentially for them.
Yeah, for sure. So there'll be documentary checks on all of those products of animal origin coming into the ports in Ireland. So yeah, it is going to get more complicated. There are identity and physical checks required also, and those checks are laid down in EU legislation for the physical checks, and the rates vary depending on the commodity. For live animals, it's 100%. For poultry meat, it's for human consumption, the physical checks are 30%. Identity checks are required on all consignments of live animals, products of animal origin, germinal products and animal byproducts, and on a percentage of consignments of regulated plants and plant products. So if there are people who may not want to carry those goods because of the challenges, if what you're saying is correct, that doesn't surprise me necessarily.
Yeah.
Okay, I have a question here. So I know Vicky is just going out to people who put questions up on the screen to see if they want to come in and talk to you guys directly. If not, I'm quite happy to read them out. So just want to call out, Ray, this is for you. How will the physical process of closing transits in another EU country work from Ireland?
Yeah, I think in the presentation, I referenced the office destination. So office destination will be on the normal transit procedure as such that you close it at an office destination. But it's important to note that Calais, or the tunnel in Calais, will not be an office destination. So you'd have to go further inland. A lot of the French offices on the coast started acting as office destination. You'd have to go further inland to close it as an office. And they operate, in a lot of cases, office hours rather than 24/7. So it is something to note. You can look it up on the European databases, the relevant offices that are based in France. And we have a link on the revenue page. Use of links just gives details in relation to some of the offices that are there. But it's just, and then obviously if you use the simplified transit procedure and the customer in France or the logistics operator has authorized premises in France, they can close it at the premises. So it's that benefit of the simplify that you can close it at the premises again.
Thanks, Ray. And just when I have you, another one for you, and maybe David wants to come in as well. You talked about simplified special procedures. Is it too late to apply? If you applied for simplified transit, inward outward processing, temporary storage now, would you have that approval from you guys by Christmas?
If you had the application form correct, I don't think there's any issues. And the financial guarantee. So it's a yes, but there's a lot of things to have lined up. It is possible, and they are approving. We got approval. We did our webinars in October, and there was a lot of pickup. Well, a bit of a pickup in some of those procedures, and some have been approved since. So I think a lot of companies had done prep work, let's say back before the last day one as such. and they just picked it up again and there in September and October. So if there is work done, but again, if you contact the relevant unit within revenue, they'll help you with the application process.
Okay, and start to finish, what are we talking about?
I think under legislation it's 90 days on some of them, but obviously there's staff there, they're trying to process them as fast as possible. We're trying to get as many processed before December.
So we have 70 days to go.
Yeah, that's what you're looking at though. And financial guarantees from institutions, it's a different era we're in now in relation to COVID and that, so it can be a bit more tricky as well.
So let's talk about financial guarantees, and David, I might bring you in a bit as well on this, because it's something I know we are talking to you, the kind of level of awareness that people may have about the necessity for the financial guarantee and how delays on the Landbridge may impact the guarantee. Do you want to talk a little bit about that while we have you on today? Now I have a bit of an audience.
Yeah, well, let me reverse a tiny bit. I think, and Ray, you can correct me if I'm wrong, I think we need to take it in context. People want to look at simplification. If I have a model where I'm bringing full container loads in from the UK or from wherever, you don't really need a simplified procedure because you're going to do your pre-customs clearance. There's only one customs agent at the origin country and one at the destination country. So that's quite simple. Where your simplification comes in is where you have groupage movements. And the reality is that when that trailer arrives in and there's 20 different suppliers, there's 20 different end customers, and there's 20 different clearing agents, whether you have a simplified procedure or not, does not guarantee you because that'll get through because there's 20 other people on that boat. What you need to do is go and find somebody who has a simplified procedure that is bringing the whole truck in so that you put your product into a supply chain that has that already. Because you do your simplified procedure, correct me if I'm wrong, Ray, and there's 20 other shipments on that truck, it's still going to go through customs, and if somebody's wrong, it's going to be pulled anyway.
Yeah. So it is beneficial that if you're using a supplier or a logistics company that is doing the groupage, that they have the authorization and they can move it to their premises and then they can give you your goods and the rest of the stuff has to wait. You don't care about that as such.
Yes, correct. Absolutely. So the reality is, people don't need to rush and go and get simplification. If they're moving full loads, they don't really need it. Go with model one, which is your direct model. If you're bringing in groupage, yes, go simplification, but get your provider to do it because you doing it yourself will not bring you any benefit and will cost you money and time.
Yeah, the benefit is really on the logistics providers as such, and it's a business for them as well that they can move certain goods that are cleared. They don't have everything stopped at the port as well, and it's delays as well at the port then as well.
Correct. So look, every logistics provider will be doing this for ourselves. We have one in Dublin, we have one in Galway. We'll move our product through all the way through to Galway. It's into the bond, and yes, if there's 20 different providers doing customs clearance, fine. They can in the 90 days to do it, but it allows people's product to come through cleanly and effectively. And that's the model people need to be looking at on simplification, not doing it themselves because it's going to bring you no benefit on groupage.
Yeah, it's that discussion with the supply chain.
What about the impacts and guarantees, the two of you?
You need to talk to your logistics company if they have the transit guarantee to ensure that they're increasing it. They may have it already. If they don't have it, they need to have enough of a guarantee to cover what goods they're moving, and the guarantee reflects the goods they're moving as such.
Absolutely.
And I think what you were hinting at, Ray, but didn't say was that banks in a crisis like that may have different views on lending to different companies at the moment, which may impact some companies' ability to be able to, but some of the hauliers to be able to get that money. So, and I know we're talking to you separately about how government may be able to help with that. But you said you have an audience now if you wanted to say something in relation to that.
Yeah, just in relation to the guarantees, even from our experience last year, it was that businesses initially did get the approvals but didn't want to activate them until Brexit happened, and obviously it didn't happen. So they were very correct. And at the moment now, there may be a bit of a waiting game, but there shouldn't be any more. It's going to happen on the 1st of January. So those ones that have existing transit guarantees are increasing them. Those the operators that may only be dealing with UK trade may be getting those transit guarantees in place now.
Could I just come in and maybe add to that? It's obviously, the financial guarantee that's required under the CTC, it depends on the tariffs.
Yeah.
And obviously those tariffs are still part of the game, or part of the political negotiations that are ongoing. And in the agriculture sector, those tariffs are very significant. So under the UK global tariff regime, the tariffs, let's say, on beef are extremely high, and other agricultural commodities for that matter. So the financial guarantee is linked to the tariff. So if there is a tariff-free, quota-free FTA, that will then impact on the financial guarantee. I just wanted to make that point as an add-on, okay?
That's a very good point, Louise. And sorry, we still have quite a number of people on the call, so I'm going to continue. If our speakers are okay, we'll continue with a few more questions, and people will drop when they need to drop, but there's still quite a lot of people on. So I'm going to continue, and I have one for you, Louise, actually, if it's okay. You mentioned in your presentation that checks would be required upon entry into the EU, and alternative solutions to the technical amendment, and I think it was the Commission Delegated Regulation EU 2019-21-24. Could you give us a bit of a hint or a clue what that technical amendment might be?
Well, I can tell you exactly what it is. So the technical amendment that we worked very hard to achieve was to allow the BCP of re-entry to be notified of the consignment re-entering the BCP, either through traces or through alternative information systems. So as I outlined in my presentation, Ireland and Belgium are going to avail of that flexibility, whereby we are going to, rather than requiring operators who are bringing goods in from the continent into Ireland for incoming internal transits to have to complete a CHED on traces, they'll only have to complete the TAD on the NCTS system. That information, together with the pre-boarding notification on the Customs Ro-Ro service, will be shared by Revenue with the Department of Agriculture, allowing us then to conduct the documentary checks. So it reduces the burden on operators without requiring them to complete the Part 1 of the Common Health Entry document in traces. We can tell you that Belgium are going to have a similar arrangement, whereby goods that are going from Ireland across the Landbridge into Belgium, they have agreed to use the flexibilities that are in that technical amendment, whereby again operators going from Ireland into Belgium aren't required or won't be required to complete the CHED on traces. But they will be required to complete the transit advisory document. Now the Belgians, and it's somebody asked the question, what are the Netherlands doing for imports? We're seeking a bilateral with the Dutch just to get confirmation on the approach that they're going to take in relation to whether it's a TAD only or a TAD and a CHED. So I just wanted to make that point. In terms of we haven't seen the final delegated regulation, because once it's agreed at working party or expert level in the Commission, it then has to go through a legal process where it's placed before Council and Parliament. And so we haven't the final published regulation, but nevertheless it's a technical amendment, and we're working on the basis that it is going to reflect what was agreed by the member states at Commission level. So that's the situation. Okay.
Thank you, Louise. If I'm breaking up, I apologise, but the internet's gone a bit loopy in our house. Okay, so here's a question. If I am shipping to the EU through the Landbridge and our shipper collects in Ireland, delivers to a UK warehouse where it is consigned and then shipped onto the EU, will one declaration cover that? I guess that's to you, Ray.
Nice, easy one. It is a T2 declaration, transit declaration to the UK, then a separate T2 from the UK to France. It is pretty much as close as I can get to covering it on the call. So you do a transit declaration from Ireland into the UK warehouse. That obviously warehouse needs to be supervised. Custom supervision needs to be applied there so it doesn't lose the union status. So again, you need to check with your logistics company, the haulier, whoever's moving it. Does that warehouse have the relevant authorizations from HMRC to retain the EU status? And then when you're moving it on again, you need to have a T2 from the warehouse to France, Germany, wherever it's going to go to. But the new T2 will have to reference the previous one to show the union status as such.
Could I just come in on top of that? I just want to make sure that we're not picking up GB products in that consolidation that's happening in the UK in GB. So if we are, then it's a new import. It's going to be an import going into France. So a SAD would be required. It wouldn't be a transit. And could I just add on in terms of going into Belgium? As I said, the Belgians are proposing to use the TAD-only system, but that's for consignments that are leaving Ireland and that are not being consolidated in Great Britain. They're moving from Ireland across the Landbridge into Belgium. So there's a lot of detail in this, and we have a real challenge in terms of communicating that detail. But there is a lot of detail in this. It's very complicated. So going back to maybe the overriding point, obviously exporters who use the direct routes to the continent avoid all of these customs and regulatory formalities. And really, if people, and notwithstanding the delays that the UK are expecting, in particular on the short straits and in Kent, businesses really need to, be cognizant of, the challenge now of trading across the Landbridge. And I would really encourage people, if they haven't already done so, to engage with the ferry operators. I know that there's a particular challenge for agri-food exporters where there's an ask for a daily efficient service, especially where you're dealing with short shelf life product. And we are engaging with the ferry companies on that, but it's up to the businesses to actually book the direct routes. Go and say, I want to book a daily direct route from Dublin or Rosair or whatever ports to the continent, Waterford, Cork, and there's a range of new services have been put on over this year, and more are planned next year. But really, businesses really need to think seriously about those direct routes, because this is only a flavour of the complexity that we're going to be dealing with.
David, do you want to come in there?
Look, I couldn't agree more with Louise. The bottom line on that particular customer, you need to go back to your Incoterms and what you're doing with your product that's going through the UK and that you're picking up in the UK. If it's on the same invoice, then you have a problem. So there's a huge amount of complexity. And I think people, if they have to go through the Landbridge, go through the Landbridge, but go with your eyes open and understand that the reality is, I do believe there's going to be a shift. It's happening already. Louise has mentioned there. It's going to continue to go towards a direct routing to the UK. It's getting closer as more ships come on and more routes come on. And that's really where people need to be pushing themselves, unless you have a burning desire to get your product quickly to market. And even if you do go across the Landbridge in the first 4 months of operations, I think any previously gain speed will be negated by what's going to happen.
Okay, so I'm going to ask 2 questions and then a kind of wrap up. And if we could keep our answers a bit shorter, everybody, I'm just conscious of the time, but we still have a lot of people on. Okay, inward processing. So let me ask the 2 questions and I'll go to the panel. Inward processing. If we import flour from the UK, make items and ship the finished good back to the UK, is that covered under inward processing? That's one question. And then another one, so that I think we might start off with you on that one, Ray. And then the second one is, albeit the UK will not require export help to accompany a consignment of POAO, so products of animal origin, until the 1st of April. Will exports health certs be required to be issued on the Irish side from the 1st of January? And we'll go to you, Louise, on that one first, I think, and then go to Ray on the other one, and then David, if you feel you need to mop up, we'll bring you in.
No was the answer.
Okay. Well, that was very bad. First one for a succinct answer, so you get it done. Okay, over to you, Ray.
Yes, you can use inward processing, but contact the section just in relation to application.
Okay, perfect. Okay, I have, and then one last question, and it's on DDP, and it's just a concern I actually have myself as well. So the question is, re-DDP Incoterm for small Irish supplier to large UK supplier who can appear as consignee who can appear as consignee on the UK import SAD if the Irish exporter does not have a UK EORI number and a UK importer does not want to be named as importer of record? Are there alternative options?
Yes.
Go on, elaborate.
You want the short answer? Yes.
Give me a slightly longer one. No more than 10 words.
Okay. So unless you have a fiscal entity yourselves, you need to go to a third party who can act on your behalf. You need to make sure you do that correctly, but that is possible to do.
Okay. So look, I'm going to ask each of our presenters just in no more than maybe 30 seconds just to give a wrap-up comment. Just before you do that, what I would say, one of the things that we are beginning to pick up from our members is that however prepared we might be, and you can hear from our panelists today that we still have a lot more to do, and certainly our experience in recent weeks is that there is still a lot of companies with a lot more work to do. And actually, David, when I come to you in your wrap-up, you might just mention a bit what ALS does, because I think there's a gap there in the market in terms of customs expertise that somebody like ALS can pick up. But one of the concerns that is really beginning to creep in now to our members who are either exporting or importing or going through the UK is that the people that they're dealing with, their counterpart in the UK, however prepared we might be, they're miles behind us, and it's causing a big impact on them getting prepared themselves. So just as a wrap up in about 30 seconds, if I can go to each of our speakers, we're starting with Louise.
So in terms of wrapping up, we have 65 days left till the 1st of January. Trade is going to change significantly from then onwards in terms of the customs and regulatory requirements for trading both with Great Britain and through Great Britain. And I would really, really encourage businesses who haven't already done so to act now. I would also say that the Landbridge is going to be subject to severe delays, and businesses, in my opinion, should seek to mitigate that risk and move to direct routes to the continent. And I would encourage you, anybody who is moving those goods or businesses who are interested in protecting their business, that they would engage with their hauliers and the shipping companies and ask them to, not only ask them to provide direct services, but also book those services direct to the continent, because the ferry companies say that they will respond, but people have to make the bookings. So, last thing, I appreciate people are in very challenging circumstances as a result of COVID. We acknowledge that, and we really do appreciate the pressure that businesses are under. But notwithstanding that, we really need you to make sure that you're ready for the changes. The economic Brexit is going to come on the 1st of January. Thank you.
Right.
Yeah, I think it's echoing what Louise said. It's take actions now. So if you are planning to move any goods involving GB from January, early parts of 2021, know who's going to do those declarations, who's responsible for them, who's going to complete them, know the data that you're required to have those completed on your behalf, or if you're completing them yourself, and getting those ready now. I know I spoke about special procedures and the relevant authorizations. Have a discussion with your supply chain partners in relation to the transit guarantees and that type of stuff. look at those procedures. But the main thing is to get registered for EORI, get registered with agriculture, food and food products, and make sure you know who's going to do those declarations on your behalf. And then if you are exporting, who's responsible for those import formalities in the UK.
Thanks, Ray. David?
Listen to Ray, Louise, first of all. We're not in a crisis, but if you're not ready, and I can guarantee you your suppliers and your customers are not ready if you are, look at what you've been presented today, get a pen and paper, draw out your supply chain and go talk to your logistics provider, your customs agent provider. The likes of Sean in ALS can support you on that, and look at how you have to execute it. But it's like a book I read my grandchild every second night. We're going on a bear hunt, and the big picture of that is we can't go through it, we can't go over it, we can't go under it, we have to go through it. The reality is we can go around it. So we need to really look at that, and people need to question their supply chain and go, the reality is I might be going on a slightly longer lead time. The reality is I don't think that's the case. And there's opportunities for companies to lower their cost base. You need to go back and challenge your organization. Yes, there is certain foodstuffs and products that need to move quickly. Apart from that, we're in a different world. Have a conversation with your people in your organization and change your supply chain.
Okay, thanks, David. So thanks to our speakers today, Louise, Ray and David, and thank you very much for what's been a very comprehensive. I know we've gone way over time, but this is really important. And just to say that we have been recording this, and the recording will be up on our website probably in the morning. And there's so much information in this that I would encourage our listeners to come back to it. And please contact us or contact our presenters directly if you need further information or assistance. Thanks for joining us today. We do certainly appreciate you being with us. And we look forward to engaging with you all again very soon. So speak to you all again soon in the future. And in the meantime, stay safe. Okay, thanks everybody. Thanks, Vicky. Cheers.